What's up, guys? So when I first heard Andre Ward was retiring, okay, I was a little upset as a fan. I'm not gonna lie, I was really upset. Because I just feel like I'm a big fan, and I felt like he was just now getting the recognition that he deserved. Most people had him there at the pound for pound spot. I think he's the best fighter since the post Floyd Mayweather era. Okay. Uh, I thought he's always been right under the Floyd Mayweathers and the Manny Pacquiao's as far as ranking, pound for pound ranking. I always held him that high, you know, and I felt like people are just now recognizing him as the best fighter. Of course, you still have your critics. You're always gonna have critics, but I felt like his time was now. And the level of fame has gone up. I'm seeing him on different networks doing interviews now, and I'm seeing him a lot, not just online, but on television, and I feel like he's a great role model as a black American fighter. He's never getting into any trouble. You know, he's not out here living this crazy lavish lifestyle. He just loves his family. He loves his wife. He loves his children. You know, he's from the Bay, and he's a huge role model out there to them for them. I wish we had someone in New York like that. We have some guys, a Daniel Jacobs in New York, but he's not on that level of fame yet. And he's definitely not as good as a fighter as Andre Ward. I wish we had someone like Andre Ward here that would motivate youngins to want to fight. And I hope when he does retire, I hope he finds a way to keep himself relevant. I would like to continue hearing his commentary. I love his commentary. Okay. Um, maybe start up a gym, become a trainer. I hope he stays relevant in some form because I think he's a great role model. All right. And that's what kind of makes me upset. Not really a role model for me, but I think for the youngins, I think he's a role model. I think we're around the same age, you know. But as far as overall, like he has a great just his whole setup is great, and I wish there were more people like him. There's others out there that I also consider to be role models. Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, even a young Errol Spence already is shaping up to be a good role model. As far as these American fighters, Black American fighters. But I hold Andre Ward as the highest because of his legacy and his skill set. He's great. He's done nothing but won in his career, and outside of the ring, he's doing nothing but winning. So on that point, I was upset. I did want to see the Adonis Stevenson fight, but to be honest with you, that fight doesn't really define him. It doesn't. Becoming undisputed really doesn't define a fighter. I would have liked it as a diehard boxing fan. I would have loved it. Okay, but the Kovalev fight was a bigger fight. It was. A lot of people held Kovalev as most people had him in the top five. Okay, most people thought Kovalev won the first fight. Okay, so I thought that was a more meaningful fight, both the first fight and the rematch. Okay, than Adonis Stevenson. Adonis Stevenson doesn't really get much respect because he's not fighting the guys that we want to see him fight. He's not. I know he's interested in fighting Andre Ward. I know he's called them out, but he lost a lot of fans when he didn't fight Kovalev. Let's be honest. And that fight doesn't define him. It doesn't. It doesn't define Andre Ward. And listen, if you don't have the drive to want to continue fighting, then retire. It's a perfect exit. You just knocked out a guy that's never been beaten before, and many consider to be the most dangerous fighter in this sport. One of the most dangerous. It's the perfect exit. You're undefeated. You got a big, huge paycheck. He entertained a couple of fights. He entertained a Bellew fight. He entertained a Joshua fight, because those were money fights. And it seemed like that's the way he was going in his last, since before the rematch with Kovalev. He was talking the way he was talking. He was like, listen, if it doesn't make financial sense, he doesn't really care, And I don't think he was afraid of Adonis Stevenson. He fought too many good fighters for to be afraid of Adonis Stevenson. As much as I wanted to see that fight, I didn't think he was afraid of Adonis. You know, he fought too many good fighters. You know, too many dangerous fights. Solomon Barrera was a dangerous fight. You know, Froch, Kessler, Edison Miranda, Sakio Bika, Chad Dawson. Too many dangerous fights for him to say that Adonis Stevenson was someone he was ducking. You know, as much as I wanted to see it, I can't say that. I would never say that. You know, he fought freaking Kovalev twice. He beat him. A lot of people think it was a gift, and he didn't have to fight him again. A lot of people were calling him, he was saying he was scared. And he beat him in a rematch, and he stopped him in a rematch. Gave him the drive to come back, was in incredible shape, the best shape I've seen him in years, and was dominant in that fight, you know, and did his thing. It's a perfect way to go. So I feel him on that level. This sport doesn't love you. It doesn't love you. The sport doesn't love you. Be whoever. There's always someone else. He goes and beat Adonis Stevenson. If he did, there's going to be someone else that people are going to want to see him fight. There's always someone else. It's always something. And he left the sport while he was on top. Okay, he left. He wasn't forced to retire like Bernard Hopkins. He wasn't forced to retire. So I respect him, and I hope we still see him in some form doing something, you know, because he's a guy I believe that I want to hear him and what he has to say about boxing or in general, about things in general. You know, gives great interviews. You know, a man of God. I respect that man. As a man, I respect Andre Ward. You know, and as a fighter, I think he's an incredible fighter. Now personally, I started watching Andre Ward, probably about, you know, maybe a little bit before the Edison Miranda fight. I guess when YouTube started becoming popular, you know, I knew of him. Because he was a Olympic gold medalist. But to be honest with you, I didn't really start watching him until like maybe around the Edison Miranda fight. You know, if I didn't see fights on the networks, I didn't see fights. If it wasn't on ESPN, Friday Night Fights, if it wasn't on HBO, Showtime, you know, or, you know, MSNBC, that was it, you know. I mean, that was it, you know, until YouTube came out and it gave me, you know, access to watch whoever I wanted to watch, you know. I think that my personal favorite fight of Andre Ward was probably I would say the Edison Miranda fight was his best performance to date, you know, as far as him stepping up and beating someone that was extremely dangerous and good. That fight made me realize how good he was. But my personal favorite fight was probably the Kessler fight. I love the Kessler fight. You know, I love that fight because I thought Kessler was very, very good. I often compared him to Kovalev. You know, when we were talking about the Kovalev fight, I used that fight to say, hey, guys, go, if you want to see a possible outcome of this fight, go watch Kessler because there's so many similarities there between Kessler and Kovalev. You know, but back then, the reason why I like that fight, even to this day, that's still probably my favorite fight, because Andre Ward was a much more quicker fighter and much more aggressive. You know, as you age, you become more defensive. You know, you're not as athletic as you get older, especially because he's going up in weight as well. And plus, he had surgery, he had layoffs. So as good as he still is, in the rematch with Kovalev, he reminded a lot of the old Ward came back because he was such in great shape. But I think the absolute prime of Ward is when he fought Kessler. And that was such a great fight to me, you know, because it was more competitive than a lot of people say on here. You know, I think that fight was a lot more competitive. I think Ward won clearly, but I think Kessler was giving him a great fight. That's my personal favorite fight. You know, I love the Chad Dawson fight. You know, I love how dominant he was against Chad Dawson. You know, because Chad Dawson was so good at 175. He was so good up to that point. Even with the loss to John Pascal, I thought even Dawson came back in that fight, you know. And that was a close fight. Um, I love the I didn't wasn't a big fan of the Bika fight. I wasn't a big fan of the Frotch fight like that. Um, fights that he won, big fights, but the Kessler fight was big to me. The Dawson performance was cute, which was great. Um, the Barrera fight wasn't a great fight, but it was a very dangerous fight for Ward because he had only came back to fight Smith, and he was very rusty in that fight. And then he went another year without fighting before he fought Sullivan Barrera, who was undefeated at that time. That was on a tear at that time. And Barrera has been successful for that fight. This is what we talk about when we speak on resumes. You gotta look at who these fighters fight, but you gotta also look at their opponents and what they did after you beat them or lost to them. Because Barrera has still been doing extremely well since he lost to Ward. And that just goes to show he fought a rusty Ward, and Ward easily won in my opinion. You know? It wasn't a close fight, it was a decent fight. So it was competitive, but Ward, it was no doubt that Ward won that fight. And a lot of people going into that fight, people thought that Sullivan Barrera was a bigger man, a good fighter, and he was going to pull off the upset. Let's be honest. That's what people thought going into that fight. And Ward made it look easy again. And that's what that's what he does. Your greatest abilities, he knows how to take that from you in some form. And what made Ward so great, what made him great is that when he was down, and he was down big in that Kovalev fight, he still found a way to come back. Being down, taking big shots, being down, and was able to come back strong and finish this fight strong the way he did. He won the second half of the fight clearly. You got to give credit to him. He's been down a couple of times, but that was the only fight he came close to losing. And he eliminated that whole thing by destroying Kovalev in a rematch. It's a perfect way to exit. So as far as legacy is concerned, all right, legacy, where do I place him? Well, it's kind of difficult, because I feel like there's a lot of fighters out there that have lost, throughout the career, like a Bernard Hopkins, that have more names overall on their resume, But this is where I place him, and I've always compared these two fighters to Andre Ward because of the weight divisions that they fought at. I always compare him to Bernard Hopkins, and I believe that Ward is better than Bernard Hopkins ever been, in my opinion. That's no disrespect to Hopkins in any way. I know legacy-wise, a lot of people are going to view Hopkins higher or have him higher than Andre Ward, okay? Because of his accomplishments. He was such a dominant middleweight for a much longer time. He fought Roy Jones, even though he lost. A lot of fighters he fought a lot of great fighters that he both have wins and losses to, okay? From different eras. But what I will say is that I think Ward is a better fighter than Bernard Hopkins. He can do everything Bernard Hopkins do and better, and he's more athletic. And just the pacing of his career, even with those layoffs, he came in, started younger. Okay, he's exiting younger, and in that period of time that he accomplished a lot. He fought a lot of good fighters. Okay, and I believe that the majority of the fighters that Bernard Hopkins lost to, Ward would have beaten in my opinion, the majority of them, almost all of them. I think the only fighter they have in common is Chad Dawson. Okay, and I know Chad Dawson came down in weight, and a lot of people like to say that he was weight trained. I really believe that Ward would have beaten Chad Dawson regardless if he had moved up to 175 or not. Okay, he went up to 175 and beat Kovalev. Okay, and Chad Dawson was never on Kovalev's level. He's not. And I don't even like Kovalev, but I respect his skills. All right, the dude is a very good fighter. So I just throw that out the window. Okay. Um, Chad Dawson beat Bernard Hopkins. And I think Ward would have beaten a lot of guys that Bernard Hopkins lost to. Okay, I think Ward would have beaten Jermaine Taylor. All right, he's beaten fighters that beat Jermaine Taylor. You know what I'm saying? I think Ward is much better than Bernard Hopkins. So if we're gonna place him somewhere, let's start off with that. Let me just go there with that. I think historically, many might not view him up there as a Bernard Hopkins, maybe, because Bernard Hopkins is considered by many to be one of the greatest middleweights ever. But overall, I think Ward was a better fighter than him. Okay. I personally, one of my favorite dream matches was him against Roy Jones Jr. I would have loved to see a Andre Ward fight a prime Roy Jones. A prime Ward against a prime Roy Jones. Obviously Roy Jones is my second favorite of all time, period. All time, Roy Jones is my second favorite fighter of all time. All right. But would I love to see that match because Ward had so many tools that he could bring to the table that a lot of fighters that a dominant Roy Jones fought didn't have. I think Andre Ward was better than a lot of fighters that Roy Jones did beat when he was in his prime. Um, and I would have loved to see that fight. I think I think out of all of the people that Roy Jones beat, or out of all of the people that had a chance of beating Roy Jones in his prime, Ward would have been he would have had a better chance of beating Roy Jones than anybody else throughout Roy Jones' career in his prime. Not post heavyweight Roy Jones. I mean, Roy Jones at 175, 160, somewhere in between there. I would have loved to see that fight at 168 when Ward was, around the Super 6 tournament time or maybe post that, somewhere around that time. That's what I would have loved to see. Okay, so that was my dream fight. I personally will have Andre Ward and probably in my top 10 favorite of all time somewhere. Um, incredible fighter. He's exiting at a great time. I can't blame him. I want to see more of him, but I understand. Listen, if you don't have the drive, exit the game. This sport doesn't love you. Make your money. He doesn't live the lavish lifestyle, so he should be fine financially. He doesn't need it, and you never want to stay in this sport because you need the money. You don't want to do that. So that's it. Let me know what you guys think. What was your favorite Andre Ward fight? Your favorite Andre Ward moment? What are your dream Andre Ward matches? Dream matches or whatever. Mine would have been Roy Jones at his prime. If he stayed, who did you want to see him face? I wanted him to face Adonis Stevenson. But to be honest with you, outside of Adonis Stevenson, there was no fight that I really, really wanted to see. I only wanted to see that fight because Adonis Stevenson held a title that he didn't hold. So if I have any criticism of Andre Ward, it was just the fact that he was so close of becoming undisputed, and he chose to exit the game right before he became undisputed. But with that being said, I hold tournament winners at a higher standard than title holders. Okay, him winning the Super 6 tournament, I feel like he beat the best fighters in that division at that time. Other guys that just weren't in the tournament. A lot of guys left the tournament. It is what it is. That's not his fault. A lot of guys didn't enter the tournament. They came up to 175. And after a couple fights, he fought the best guy at 175, the most dangerous fighter at 175. A guy that he got a very, very close, controversial win against. And he chose to go in a rematch and fight him. He didn't have to do that. That's very, very important. We have to factor that in. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think on Andre Ward historically, and don't come here to hate. Listen, if you're not a Ward fan, don't come on here to hate. The guy is retired now. You don't have to like him, but don't come in here being disrespectful for those people. This video is not about that, you know. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.